Daniel, please join me. So, you're not a trained filmmaker. You were there, as you were saying beforehand, as a journalist in the first place. What inspired you to pick up a camera and film these people?
Well, I guess the story kind of came to me. I encountered this amazing subculture or community of street musicians and felt that through their lives we could understand so much about Indonesia, and they were also just so charming and interesting. And I was a print journalist. I was writing for newspapers and magazines, and I wrote a book about Jakarta, but I felt that in the case of this story, the written page was so limiting because it was so musical and so dynamic and colorful and cheeky, and no matter how well one wrote, it's very hard to describe the energy on the buses and in the political protests. So I just, the medium that made sense was film, and I taught myself to use a video camera. I've always been a photography hobbyist, so I understood a bit of light and composition, but I'd never touched a video camera, and I just kind of learned on the job, and the first few weeks of footage were pretty awful, and then I learned to shoot a little better, and then I just went ahead and shot this, and had a very good editor, Ernest Tarianto, who kind of made sense of the mess of 250 hours of footage that I shot.
Because you started this 7, 8 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, it's about 7 years ago, and shot for about 5 years, and then we edited for about a year and a half.
Yeah. I'd say so.
So you guys caught the last 2 hours of that process.
Was it one of the characters in the film that inspired you in particular, or did you discover those as you went along? And
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the characters in the film, and they're very close friends of mine at this stage, obviously. But I felt the story of the street buskers as a phenomenon was strong enough, and then I set out to find main characters, because I, as a documentary film fan, although I wasn't a filmmaker, I knew that what really grabbed me, what made a strong documentary, was strong lead characters, and I've always been a lover of character-driven documentaries rather than issue-based documentaries. And I knew that if I expected you as an audience to spend 2 hours in a dark room watching this, I wanted you to have fun with the characters. So I set out to find very strong, colorful personalities, people with charisma and humor, and also, this was obviously going to be a film about poor people, about the marginalized poor. But one of the things I hated most about certain documentary films was this notion or this tendency to cast poor people as victims, as objects, as subjects. And it was very important to me as a person, as a filmmaker, as someone who's worked in humanitarian aid before, to present them on the big screen as protagonists and indeed as heroes of their own life story. So I wanted them to have agency, I wanted them to have voice. And in Titi and Bonnie and Ho, when I met them, I knew within 3 minutes that these people, although they had nothing, they were very much in charge of their own destiny, and I loved that about them.
yeah, I mean, it helps that they can sing.
It does, and although, you know, in the case of Ho, you could argue that maybe he can't always sing, and I tell him that to his face, and he tends to agree. And when I was doing this kind of I spent the first 2 months hopping on and off buses and doing what I would say is a kind of a secret audition in my head, trying to choose them, and musical talent was a criteria, but nor was I trying to find, you know, the Indonesian Idol or American Idol. I was looking for people with some musical talent. In the case of Bonnie, tremendous songwriting ability, and Titi has this beautiful folk singer voice, and Ho has his own thing going on. But personality was really the number one factor. And
He's certainly got that.
Yeah, he's a real showman. And I love the fact that you don't always have to take everything at face value. I mean, we know that Ho's a showman and he's interacting with the camera, and he's a little bit of a Jesus Christ kind of figure and a troubadour with his message. But the other criteria that was important to me was I wanted musicians who didn't just play cover songs of well-known bands, but who composed their own music, because not all of them do, and who wrote lyrics that were interesting and insightful and revealing and said something about the social condition, or even just their own personal lives, their love and their quest, and the political situation. And I think that was interesting. My editor and I worked very hard to try to use their songs and their lyrics as a storytelling device, as kind of another layer of the narrative.
So you follow these guys for 5 years. Did you have any idea what you're getting yourself into there?
No, and then, I mean, not at all. And honestly, I think if someone had told me in the beginning that it would take 5 years and 7 for the whole process, I would have given up. So it's kind of good. It's sort of ignorance is bliss kind of situation. But I will say that in retrospect, I mean, some of it was due to my inexperience in filmmaking, and I learned a lot of things the hard way, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm not a very good manager of my own time. But I don't think I could have made a film like this in much less time, in the sense that it really takes time for things like this to unfold. First of all, for the characters to become comfortable with you and to trust you and to be themselves, to be natural. And secondly, you know, you saw a lot of events unfold on screen, and that happened over the course of 5 years, and that doesn't happen on demand. And things like a wedding or a divorce or somebody dying, you know, just put in storytelling terms, that doesn't happen in 2 months. And you can't force reality, and I think that's why so many reality shows don't work, and we see right through them. So I had to be very patient, and sometimes I'm asked what the most challenging aspect of the film was, and it wasn't anything technical. That you can sort of get your head around. It's being patient. It's learning to live and breathe the story and wake up each morning and not get bored and not lose faith in your story and in your characters. And in that sense, they never let me down. I really knew that at every month I was unpeeling another layer of this thing.
I don't want to hog all the questions. Just raise your hand. You're very keen, very quick.
I'm wondering about the backstory of how you got the camera into the jail.
Right. Straight for the kill. That's an interesting and a fun story that I always like to tell about. It wasn't through, I didn't stage anything, and I didn't actually even pay any money, which in Indonesia is very unusual, to not have to bribe anyone. I'd been waiting, look, this whole idea of officers arresting the street buskers was like this boogeyman thing hovering over the story. I was shooting for about 2 years at that point, and all you hear them talking about is their fear of the officers and getting locked up in these grim jail cells. And I had hours and hours of them talking about this. But as a filmmaker, I wanted to show rather than tell. But you can't stage these things. And one day I was going to meet Ho at the bus terminal. I think I wasn't even going to shoot him. He was returning a T-shirt that I gave him. And just as I was about to meet him, the truck you saw screeches to a halt, and the officers jump off and say, "We're arresting you for busking," because it is illegal officially, and street people are considered, you know, dirty things that need to be cleaned from the streets, which is ironic in a city that has so much air pollution, that the people are being targeted. And they arrested him, and I knew that no matter what I did, I couldn't miss this opportunity to document this process. And I went up to the officers and I said, "Listen, I'm a very good friend of Ho's, and if you're taking him away, I'm coming with him." And I guess they were very junior officers and very confused why there was this white guy with a camera. And they allowed me on the truck, and then due to the reliable Jakarta traffic, it took an hour and a half to get to the jail, and I had a lot of time to think about what I was going to say. And when we got there, about 10 minutes after arriving, as Ho was checking in, the prison director finally came out and said, "Who are you, and what the hell are you doing in my jail with a camera?" And I basically bluffed my way. I told him that I was working on a film for the Jakarta government, for the municipality, about social services in the city, and I had programmed the deputy governor's name into my cell phone and handed it to the prison director and said, "Please call Deputy Governor Fauzi at that point. He knows me, he knows what I'm doing." It was just a total bluff, and I figured that someone at the level of a regional lockup center wouldn't want to call the deputy governor. And then I indulged him for about an hour in his office to explain the whole prison system and made it seem like he was kind of the big man and going to be the hero of this movie. And then he gave me carte blanche to film the whole night in the prison, which was amazing, and it ended up becoming one of the more special scenes in the film, and I think exposed a certain reality.
Good question.
Congratulations on making a very human and very naturalistic film. So I'm curious, now that you've discovered that you are a documentarist, a little bit about your journey and what, are you going to be doing more of this?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'm kind of really amazed by where this film has gone, and maybe we can talk about that in a minute, and especially domestically and what it's done. I'm pretty exhausted from the whole process, as you can imagine, a little bit traumatized by having sunk myself into something like this for this long. And I'm not rushing to make another film, although I'm not saying I wouldn't. But I care very deeply about Indonesia. I feel very much at home there. It's a country with tremendous potential, and it's actually made a lot of the right moves politically and socially in the last couple of years in particular. And I'm very fortunate to be very well connected and very close to a lot of very talented, smart, influential people now in Jakarta and elsewhere in the country. And I look forward to working with them to seize this new window of opportunity. We've got a new president who's a real reformist, and a new governor of Jakarta who's quite the opposite of the kind of government that's depicted in the film. So I think it's a real opportunity, and I see myself possibly going back to social entrepreneurship and humanitarian aid in some capacity. But I must say I love filmmaking in the end, after I kind of got through all of this.
I think you should try it again, but have a rest. That's fine.
First, I want to say congratulations. The second one, thank you very much for filming in Indonesia. And then back to my question is, how did you approach them for the first time? And then second one, what did you say?
How did I what for the first time? Sorry?
How did you approach them?
Approach them.
Yeah.
As you know, as an Indonesian, I think Indonesians are tremendously approachable and open and friendly and wonderful and warm, and they love to gossip, and they love to have heart-to-hearts. And really, I could pretend that access was a challenge, but it really wasn't. They opened up to me right away. And Bonnie and Ho and Titi, I mean, you see from their personalities that they're happy to share and they're fun. And I told them exactly what I was doing. I mean, my understanding with them from the start was that they would open up and share their lives with me for what we thought was 6 months back then, and they didn't know what they were getting into any more than I did. And that in return, I would do everything I could to make a film that portrayed them with dignity and gave them a voice and was honest to their story and to their lives. And I think we both kept our end of the bargain, and our friendship is very strong, and we've had an amazing journey since then. And you know, Indonesians are happy to share. I was amazed at what they let me be part of. So that was not a problem. Yeah, it's Indonesia's a filmmaker's dream, and they love to talk and they love to share, and they're very honest.
Hi. Yeah, hi there. Yeah, you gave me the ticket last week, so thank you. It was a very amazing film. I used to ride that bus to high school every day, so I might met that guy before, but yeah. But no, seriously, I have a million questions right now, like technical stuff, but for me, I really want to know, as a filmmaker right now, you made this film for 5 years. What drives you? Like, how did you find, like, what pushed you so far for 5 years? Because I know some people, like, 3 months into production and, like, crazy enough. You went 5 years, that's amazing. Like, I want to know.
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know, again, it's one of these things where you don't know what you're in for until you're deep into the process, and then I guess it's not anything rational. You become obsessed with the story. You become obsessed with finding out what happens next. You care for your characters. You care about the issue. And then, to be perfectly honest, I got to the point where I had already invested so much time, so many years in the film, and everyone around me knew about it, my family, my parents, my friends, that you start to develop this completely irrational fear of the film being bad, of sucking, basically. And I think what motivated me in part was the fear of the film not coming out very well. And I knew that I needed to deliver, that I needed to make a film that was really interesting and powerful and engaging, and I really wanted it to be good. And then you realize that it's really hard to make a film that's really good, and it's a very competitive world out there in the film festival scene and broadcasters. And you watch, you know, as someone who's new to documentary filmmaking, I watched hundreds of documentary films, and you're just blown away by how good documentary films are today, and the story structure. And I mean, there's just, I'm sure a lot of you have seen a lot of great documentaries. And as a first-time filmmaker, it's hard. So I knew that I needed to put in the time, I needed to put in the mileage, and make sure it was good. And find, you know, we did about 12 rough cuts of this film until we were happy. 9 test viewings with audiences. Went through 3 editors until I found the editor I really wanted to work with. So it was a really long process. And yeah, there's no shortcuts in these things. And it's true, there's a lot of documentary filmmakers just want to go out there and get the story, and I think that works for TV reportage and it works for reality TV, but for this kind of more nuanced film, you really need to invest.
Thank you.
I know there's somebody right at the back wanted a microphone. While the mics, have you got one? I don't have one. Okay, you do have a loud voice. I can hear you.
Yeah, that's a good question. How are they being perceived by their peers now, by their community, the other buskers? Mostly they're perceived as rock stars. I mean, they've done. I think they've done, or we've done, for the street busking community the unimaginable, in the sense that almost overnight they've gone from being this ignored, marginalized, unacknowledged community to people that are up on the big screen. There's posters of them all over Jakarta. They've been on all the major TV talk shows. The film kind of went nuts for a documentary, to be honest. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what it did domestically. In April, after 3 months of pretty tough negotiations with the main cinema chain in Indonesia, which dominates all the theaters, I managed to convince them to give this a shot theatrically. A documentary has never gone theatrical in Indonesia before, and I made the case that this was a relatively entertaining documentary and had music and humor, and maybe it wouldn't be so boring for lay audiences. And they agreed that it was something a bit different, and they said, we'll give you a 3-day window, 1 weekend, and then we're taking it down because documentaries don't sell. And we gave it to them, and we launched kind of a guerrilla media blitz campaign across social media with our very limited resources. And through some connections, we managed to get on a couple of key TV talk shows. And we had an amazing first weekend. We sold out theaters, and the cinema chain decided to leave it on the screen. And we ended up lasting 34 days consecutively on screens and being expanded to 5 major cities across Indonesia and breaking all the records for documentaries, and in some senses lasting more than most fiction films. And then that became the story in the media. The media was like, what is this strange documentary film that's selling out theaters? And we were invited onto all the radio shows, and they started getting gigs and offers to go on TV ads and to create radio jingles. So they've become kind of minor celebrities in Indonesia, and it really took off. So needless to say, within their own communities, they're very popular and very cool. And Bonnie and Ho and Titi are very humble. It didn't go straight to their head, and they're very generous. And we gave them, I think, 700 theater tickets to give out to their friends on the opening weekend. So everyone around them got to see the film for free on the big screen, and that was really fun.
Tell us also about how the governor of Jakarta. The governor of Jakarta picked up on the film, right?
Yeah, amazingly, given that I kind of used his office's title to bluff my way into the prison, ironically, you know, a couple of years later, the governor, a new, very progressive, open-minded, reformist governor who happens to also be Chinese-Indonesian by heritage, which is very unusual to reach that level in politics. A young guy called Governor Ahok came into power about 2 years ago, and he saw the trailer to the film, and when I was shooting this film, I really felt I was making a subversive film and that it would probably be banned in Indonesia because of the way we depict the government, the powers that be. And Governor Ahok saw this and said, this seems like, I want to be criticized. I want to understand how we can better treat the marginalized poor. So his assistant phoned me one day, and I almost fell off my seat. I couldn't believe the governor wanted to see the film. I was a little worried at that point, to be honest. And they called me in for a meeting, and his assistant said, no, the governor wants this critical film. He wants to use it as an educational tool. So he organized a gala screening for 300 of the most senior officials in the Jakarta government at City Hall, invited Ho and Boni and Titi and myself, and they performed and they screened the film. And the governor sat right in the front row, right next to me the whole time. I thought he was just going to give a speech and leave. And he was in tears at the end of the screening. And then called a press conference and announced 6 concrete policy changes and how the government was going to handle the urban poor. So that was just an amazing moment.
Last question, I'm told. So make it a long one. Yeah.
I was wondering how you thought their lives had changed by being part of this film.
The characters in the film?
Yeah, the main character.
How their lives changed by being in the film.
Yeah. Well, a lot has happened to them since the film came out. Partly, I just described some of it, and that obviously has changed their reality, being in the spotlight. I think at the deepest level, they've been acknowledged. I mean, these 3 individuals didn't even have an ID card, a year ago when the film was about to be launched. They were literally and figuratively falling through the cracks of society, especially in Boni's case. They were nobodies, and they saw themselves in some ways as nobodies, as do a lot of people in their community. And being on the big screen and being acknowledged so publicly and being on TV has just been incredible, because they're constantly told throughout their lives that they don't matter, that they don't even register. So that was amazing, and in fact, I'll never forget the first screening. Our Indonesian premiere was in Bali at the Writers' Festival, and it was an outdoor open-air screening in these beautiful gardens of a museum, and there were 700 people in the audience sitting on the grass, and we flew Boni and Ho and Titi to Bali for that. It was their first time to Bali, to this beautiful island. And at the end of the movie, the 700 people just got up, and half of them were foreigners, got up and gave them a standing ovation, and then they were sitting in the front row right in front of the screen, and I turned them around to face 700 people who were just roaring and clapping and cheering them on, and they just all had tears in their eyes. It was amazing for them to receive that kind of acknowledgement from a completely different social class, from people who mattered, from people who were so influential and wealthy in their eyes. And the journey has been really like that ever since. But what's amazed me is that they've been so comfortable in this new role. They've been so ready for this acknowledgement. And to take the political influence a step further, I was back home in Bali sitting, watching the news a few months later after our launch, and suddenly I start seeing them on television again. This time there was a very tightly fought presidential race in Indonesia a few months ago between an old guard, dictatorial former military general who was trying to take Indonesia back 15 years, and a really amazing, promising upstart, Jokowi, who's thankfully now about to become the president, who's a man of the people, a former furniture salesman, who really, people like Boni and Ho and Titi could see themselves in him. And they decided it was very important for them to galvanize whatever influence they had through the film and through their public renown to try and help the good guy in this election. And they joined the volunteers and they joined the presidential campaign, and were on stage with the presidential candidate Jokowi alongside some of the most famous rock and pop stars in the country, wearing their Jalanan t-shirts, and they were just known on TV as Ho Jalanan and Titi Jalanan and Boni Jalanan. And I'm sitting there in Bali seeing this on my screen thinking, what the hell, this film has gotten way out of control. And in the end, the candidate Jokowi won, and it was just an amazing moment for all of us, and I was so proud of them that they leveraged whatever our film was worth, and supported a candidate that meant something to them and that gave a voice to the little people in the same way that they do here. So it was really a dream come true and a really happy ending for all of us.
You should tell them about your campaign, the postcards.
Tom just very kindly reminded me that I should mention, this is kind of a 15 minutes of fame for the three of them, which is lasting more like 15 months. But in the end, this is going to go away, and this is not equivalent to regular income or safeguarding their future. And as their friend and as the director of their film, it was very important for me to try to help safeguard their future. And I've started a campaign. I've learned through this experience that poverty isn't solved with money, with cash. You need to help people make the proper arrangements in their life. And I'm trying to raise a total of $50,000 that will be enough to buy each of them a very small, humble home in a very simple neighborhood in Jakarta. Houses that will have a certificate with their name on it that are theirs for life as an asset that they can live in or rent out. But I want them to be left with something for the long term. So we've started a crowdfunding campaign on a website called fundraiser.com, and it's also easily reachable through our website, our film website, jalananmovie.com. So if there's, and people often ask what they can do to help. So there's a little postcard, a souvenir postcard you'll each get on your way out, and on the back it just gives the details of our campaign. You can read about it later. It's kind of a fun story. There's also a lot of cool stuff on the website if you're interested in seeing it later. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great questions. A special night. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. You're a wonderful audience.
And don't forget to vote.